really, we focus on serendipity. And I think that's something that happens really naturally when you give people space to gather. We're just in a world where there's a plethora of places to put your head down and work around other people. And that's good because we need that. But what there isn't are a plethora of places to gather. Like the biggest crisis of our time is not, I need a place to work. It's, I'm really lonely and I'm, facing this epidemic of social isolation across ages. And there is a massive decline of third spaces and for places for people to be and to gather. So we knew all of that and we wanted to solve that problem.
Welcome to Taste and Tactics, where founders and go-to-market leaders share how they brought their boldest ideas to life. From concept to execution, we cover every step behind these iconic launches. Join me each week for both inspiration and actionable tips. I'm Shriya Nevatia. Let's dive in. Okay, thank you so much, Jaclyn, for joining us at Taste and Tactics. Really excited to dive in. So to start off, can you just tell us who you are and what we're talking about today? We're talking about Fabrik, this amazing community space that you've built. So tell us more.
So thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm Jaclyn, co-founder and CEO of Fabrik. Fabrik is a network of social spaces designed for social health. That essentially means that we are creating spaces for people to come together in community consistently, affordably, and accessibly. And we currently have 2 locations in New York City with plans to expand much further.
And so for people who haven't visited yet, what makes this distinct from other kind of like co-working or community spaces?
Yeah, we really are working toward creating a new category of space. And I use the term social space really deliberately. There are a lot of co working spaces, and I do think that a lot of them have a community element. And the biggest differentiator at Fabrik is that we really have always been building this through a community first lens. The biggest and most intentional differentiator there is that our core persona member are people who identify as a community builder of some kind. That can be building a passion project community, it could be building a community for your business, but in general, you have a need for access to consistent and affordable space to host your community in real life, and that's embedded as a part of your membership. So while you can come here whenever you want to, and you can, of course, get work done here, it's a very social space in that there's always a gathering happening. Like this morning, we had a climate week kickoff with like 65 people, and there was people who were kind of working around it. So you have to be open to that. And because so many, about 80% of our members are builders with that ability to gather once per month, all of our gatherings are community led and sponsored. So it's really a powerful place, I think, for people who are building community and those who are seeking community to have a place where you're on the same page. Like there's shared values there that we're all here for this like collaboration, community, and connection.
That's awesome. And so you were at Spacious before. It's very different type of spaces. And so what did you borrow from that? And then what did you change that you just described? Yeah.
Spacious was a really formative experience for me. I came into building Spacious from the restaurant industry. So I was in hospitality for my whole life, leading up to 2015 when I joined Spacious. And, I had this hospitality lens on and we were building Spacious, like you alluded to. It was different by way of space because we were still using wasted space, whereas Fabrik, we're using there's a plethora of commercial office space that's open and underactivated. So that's what we focus on today. But at Spacious, we were focused on ground floor retail. It was like a retail apocalypse at the time, 10 years ago. So we're using restaurants that only serve dinner, converting those dining rooms into a network of drop-in workspaces during the day, or we were taking just vacant ground floor retail and trying to like put some energy and activation into it to uplift neighborhoods and to give people places to work. So Spacious was for productivity. We were creating places for people to be productive, work all over the city in a way that worked for your life. So if you had a meeting in the morning in, Brooklyn, and then you had to go uptown for a doctor's appointment, there's always a Spacious where you were. And it was really, really, really fun and really cool for the time. So what did I borrow from that? I mean, I think I learned a lot of what to do. And then I learned a lot of what I didn't want to bring here because that was so much focused on work. So like our like core amenities at Spacious were 100% focused on how are you the most productive version of yourself when you walk through the door. That meant for us like really great power, excellent Wi-Fi, and coffee. Those were like the 3 amenities that we provided. So like, of course, here we have those things and we want to have that, but we fuel you in other ways through like access to the space to gather your community and all those things. But from a real estate perspective, I brought a lot of which I learned from the team at Spacious, who had this incredible real estate background, about just how to think about real estate differently, how to use underutilized or wasted space in a way that is good for the business, but also good for the neighborhood and also good for the landlord.
Hmm.
And it was really unique and special the way that we thought about it then, and being able to apply that now has been really great.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like Spacious was like productivity, convenience first, and then Fabric is very like connection and a community first. But still,
Yeah,
like you
just
said, there's great Wi-Fi, there's great coffee. That
yeah, all
I've been
those
there
things.
a bunch of times. Yeah.
Yeah. But we really, we focus on serendipity. And I think that's something that happens really naturally when you give people space to gather. So I know that serendipitous connections happened at Spacious for sure. We're just in a world, almost 10 years later now, where there's a plethora of places to put your head down and work around other people. And that's good because we need that. But what there isn't are a plethora of places to gather, like in starting Fabric, excuse me, we thought about, we know the kind of space that is wasted, commercial office. We're coming out of a pandemic. This was 2023 when we started building. Like, the biggest crisis of our time is not, I need a place to work. It's, I'm really lonely. And I'm, facing this epidemic of social isolation across ages. And there is a massive decline of third spaces and for places for people to be and to gather. And also, when you live in cities like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, doing that, if you need a one-off space, is really expensive and it's prohibitive. So we knew all of that and we wanted to solve that problem. So that's kind of how it started. And I think the vantage point from which you start when building anything dictates everything. So, like, just having that lens and keeping that lens the whole time has made it just really different in every sense of the word.
Okay. Especially for a community space rather than a typical kind of transactional co-working space. One of the biggest challenges of starting, other than all of the real estate and kind of logistics that you described, is who's going to join this? How do we get them to know about it? How do we get them excited? How do we curate it? So it's a lot of what we like to focus on in this podcast. Is like, how do you do the sales and marketing? How do you find those people and those
Yeah.
customers? So let's talk about that. I mean, maybe you want to start with London. You actually started in London. So tell us about that.
Yeah, London was a really wonderful opportunity in a market that I really didn't know a lot about. But we had an interesting opportunity to launch and test Fabric in London, so we kind of jumped at it. And like I mentioned to you, I had a 4-month-old at the time, so that was like a crazy decision considering I live here in New York, New Jersey now actually. And we had this opportunity. We had a beautiful space, and we knew that London was a prime market for what we were building because I went back and forth to London multiple times before we launched, doing exactly what you said. Like, who is the core persona? Who is the audience? Who are you talking to? And we did a lot actually of what we did when we launched New York, less consistently because I was like getting on an airplane every 5 seconds. But when we did do that, we essentially just put out these blanket invites for people who were building community and said, hey, like, come to this space. Let's talk about what you need. And we started that like months and months before we ever had a physical space in London. But a lot of the people who were there at those early like open calls for builders are people who became early members of Fabric. And we thought we understood what their problems were and what they needed. Turns out in a lot of instances we were right, but that early user research is so important when you keep refining down that persona. I'm really like passionate about building for a persona. And I
Hmm.
think Fabric could be for everybody. And that's why, it is like, if you are seeking community, if you just want a place to be, like, we are here for you. But you have to, like, we really in the beginning were hyper focused on the persona of that builder and making sure that we were solving the problems that they actually had and not inventing them for them. So I think doing that early in London, having those early conversations, bringing those people together was a really important way for us to start. And then months later, when we did have that physical space and we said, okay, we heard you, like, you need space to gather and you want to collaborate with other builders to form partnerships in different communities. Okay, like, here's this space. We're opening it up to 50 founding members. Like, who wants in? Really low price point. And it was a lot of people who came to those early meetups, friends of theirs, referral, word of mouth, and a lot of organic LinkedIn outreach of just us scout. LinkedIn is, we think, where our customer is. So we just scour LinkedIn looking for builders. And that's like a very hard thing to find. And there's obviously a few words that we see people use, and it's becoming much more now a place for community builders to post. And now Fabric is tagged and everything. But in the early days, everyone was like, what are you? Like, what is
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
So it was just a lot of trial and error And those early events that that we put on were like the catalyst for everything, because who was attracted to those random hosts from this unknown company in this weird space? Because that's literally, those were the three things that were true. The people who came to that were people who were really curious about what this could be, and they really helped us kind of build it.
I have a really niche question. So I
Okay.
also love to do cold organic outreach on LinkedIn. I bought premium. I'll find people through a lot of filters, and then I'll send connection requests with a little blurb using the maximum
Yeah.
300 characters. Do you do
Yeah.
that, or do you use InMail?
Email doesn't work.
Yeah, because it looks like sales, right? Like
Yeah.
people know it's an ad. Yeah.
Yeah. We did what you did. So a lot of that, and then a lot of, yeah, connection through friends of friends, like making the connect or the follow, and then being able to send a longer message after. And it was also, I think, really important for Gwen and I. In the beginning, this was it's still very founder led, but those messages were like all Gwen and I.
hmm
So making sure that our profile, like that quick blurb in the beginning, really spoke to who we were was really important, because they were just more likely to connect and then give you the opportunity to talk in a deeper way. So yeah.
Another thing I'm curious about with London, one of the only things I know about the market is that social clubs are incredibly popular, like more
Yeah.
than New York. And so, what did you find? Did people who you brought to those early events like specifically say, here's what we don't have in a social club that we want from you?
I don't think that the people who were early members of Fabrik were the prime audience for the social clubs of London.
Okay.
I think, London was built on social club. I didn't know a lot. I mean, I knew a little bit about it, but I learned a lot. And
hmm
it was built on that. Like, it was built on tiered systems, right? And like those social clubs in London are still historically hard to get into. They're still historically very expensive. And now you kind of see this wave of social club in New York, which are all really exclusive and not the Soho houses of the world, but VVs and like all these other big
Zero
social
bond
clubs,
and stuff.
Zero
Yeah.
Bond and
Yeah.
Maxwell Social, like they all have this really wonderful community element. They're just more expensive. And like that
hmm
is a niche, just like anything else is a niche. But I found that there is a ton of that in London, and that the people who we were directly talking to were not like coming from one of those social clubs to join Fabrik. They probably were never. So I don't
hmm
think we were necessarily competing with the social club. I think it almost became more something I was aware of in New York
mm
than even London.
So you're saying in New York, people were comparing
Potentially, yeah.
between them more than in
Yeah.
London. Yeah.
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 And it might
Okay.
have
That's
also just
interesting.
been
Yeah.
the time of conversation, like I think social clubs in New York have always been a thing. It's just gotten much more prevalent because everybody wants to be in person. Like, we all are striving for connection. We all have this urge. So they're going to pop up more. It's trend. So I think it was the timing of when we launched here was very similar to the timing that a lot of those social clubs launched. But I think we've created a clear distinction.
Totally. Okay. So then when did you decide to launch in New York, and when did you decide to wind down London and move the
Yeah.
focus? Yeah.
It was a super, super hard decision. And we didn't launch London with the intention of not being there for a long time.
Totally. Yeah.
But we did have this opportunity to launch New York, and it's so logistical. It's like that is where I am. And, it's where Gwen is. So when you are like, you're such a small team in the beginning, and you really can't split your focus. And that is not to say we didn't have a fantastic, very small and mighty team in London. We did. But at some point, when you're like really truly going to market, it felt like we were really going to market in New York. And that felt a little different than launching in London. Like, no one knew who we were in
hmm
London.
hmm
We were super, super small fish in like a big pond. Whereas in New York, yes, same thing, but it's a little bit different. When you've been building in New York for a long time, you have a network. Like,
hmm
we were going to market here. So in order to do that well, and in the beginning, we were operating both. Like, we launched Tribeca in May, and we didn't make the decision to close down London until August.
hmm
And I think by launching New York and being so hands-on and so hand-holdy with it, because we were here, we learned a lot about what we would have done differently in London if that were the case. And it just made sense to make the decision, instead of splitting our very small team focus into two. We had to it was a very, very, very difficult decision, and we had to do it. It's kind of one of those go with your gut moments as a founder, where you throw your whole heart and soul into something, and then overnight you realize, like, oh, this isn't going to work. So that's kind of how it was. Like, it's not any more eloquent than that. We probably could have made it work if we really tried, but we needed to double down, and we doubled down here.
Totally. Okay, so then one of the biggest kind of like things that you learned that was easier is just straight up be in person, especially for a physical space. Be there, be able to get there all the time. What other learnings did you take from London to slightly change or dramatically change the way that you launched New York?
The space in London it was pretty much a underutilized workspace. Like there was only so much we could change about it. So it did have more of like a co-working-esque layout, but it allowed us to prove the model. Like we were looking for underutilized or wasted office, and that's what we found. And it was just not the perfect, like we learned so much about what our ideal space would look like when we were in London from using space that wasn't ideal. So we are able to take those learnings and apply them in New York, but also like who's the person that's using this? Like, when I look back to London, so much of our core member base, all of whom I adore, were tech founders or tech community builders. And that is wonderful. We have a ton of tech community builders here. But I would say that in London specifically, it skewed heavily tech. And
Hmm.
there wasn't a ton of like, there just wasn't at like in New York now. And again, we could have, if we knew that this was something we wanted, we could have made those changes in London, but we didn't really learn it until we saw it happen in New York, which is just like the diversity from not just your work and the communities that revolve your work, but the things you do as like your 360 self, like knitting clubs and book clubs and game nights and glass engraving and arts and crafts and meditation and yoga. Like these things they all exist in London. They just happened to find us in a way that was like really different in New York. And we became this home for community that is not just tech, but it's every part of who you are. It might have been the neighborhood we were in London too. We were in a really like tech centric neighborhood.
Hmm.
So it was just, again, a lot of learnings about what is so important, the neighborhood you're in, the space you're in, and the people you're talking to and how you're talking to them. So any launch that, I've done ever, like, in Spacious, we had spaces we opened and closed all the time. Like you learn so much from doing that. It's never pointless. It's never a mistake.
Yeah, the location makes sense because I feel like after SF in New York, every other tech market, they like converge into a different, like one part of the city because that's how you get those network effects. Otherwise, if tech is spread out and it's not the primary, like the biggest market, then they can't even like hang out with each other easily.
Yeah.
Versus in New York, like there really are companies spread out across like Flatiron, Soho, like
Yeah,
Grand
they're
Central, like
everywhere.
Dumbo, like Williamsburg. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Not as
different.
much as SF, but quite a bit.
Yeah, totally.
I'm curious. So you had a founding 50, both in London and
Yes.
here. Did you, after you saw that a lot of the people early on were more like just tech, more I'm just saying monotone and it's not the right word. More homogeneous.
Yeah.
Did you seek that out in New York? Did you like say like, okay, we got a bunch of tech people who are interested. We're kind of going to pick the 10 who were the most active and came to our other events and then try and like reach out more to craft communities, to fitness communities, to other communities.
I mean, at that time, no, because I don't think we realized it was something we didn't want yet. And what happened in
Mm,
New York was really organic. Same kind of thing, like open call. We're hosting these breakfast series. Like if you're a community builder in New York and like you're looking for a home for your community, come show up, free breakfast. We'll tell you what we're building. And it was just the diversity of the people in the room was massive. And like in a lot of ways, that's New York. Like there are people with just come from all corners of the world. And again, same in London, but I understand the New York market better because it's where I'm from. And just tons and tons of different communities that just showed up saying like, this is actually something I really need. And our founding 50, which is kind of the playbook that we use when we launch any city. And now, another learning, every space we hope to do one when we're in very distinct neighborhoods. It's our way of saying, like, here's a space, it's yours. Like, make it your home and program it how you will. And what happened early days here in Tribeca was like, it was just so amazing. Like every kind of community you can imagine was just in that early 50. And what that does, if we give them essentially like free reign, like do what you will here. You can host as much as you want. Like here's this insanely accessible price point. It will never change, even though pricing has changed. Your price never changes. Like you are core. And now like help us build this into what you want it to be. And that was just, again, very organic.
I love that. One thing that I think is really fun, in addition to the breakfast, you did a 1-day pop up in the space, super scrappy before it was like
God.
fully put together. So tell us more about that. How'd you put it
Yeah,
together?
that
What
was
happened?
silly.
Yeah.
That was very silly. God, this was so funny. We were looking for space, looking for space, looking for space. We finally found one. And again, like Fabrik was no one. Like, no one really knew who we were. And also our mission was different than anything that they'd seen before. And we were asking for space. So the space we're in now, to give us a 1 day license agreement in the middle of December in like the dead of winter and said you could use it for 12 hours. Like, good luck. And I was like, okay. So we show up. It was an old office. Everything was left. So like dusty, dirty, like the tabletops were filthy. We got there at like 7 o'clock in the morning, me and Gwen and another member of our team, Michelle. I'll like never forget it. And we were like, okay, what do we do? Like we almost like didn't even know what we didn't know
Hmm.
was there. So I just remember like spending that day freezing cold, like going to Dwayne Reed 100 times on Hudson Street, like bleaching everything. I mean, there was no toilet paper, like there was nothing. It's like just Instacart, like everything. And it was just so funny. And we hosted this like community builder interview. I'll never forget it. Like a bunch of people showed up. I interviewed this woman named Morgan, who's head of community for Fast Company, and Inc. 5000, which was like a tremendous get, like friend of kind of our networks. And we had this wonderful conversation and we made it really as nice as we could. We ordered, charcuterie boards from Murray's Cheese Shop, and we just asked everyone to like bear with us. And they totally did. And, we had printed signs on like literal like computer paper, like everything was janky. How do you get into the building? I don't know. It's on like a side. It was just so funny. And we did it. And I'll never forget 12 hours later, like we were boxing up whatever boxes from the paper towels that we'd ordered from Instacart with like all of our stuff because we had to like basically had to look like we were never there. And
Mm,
it was just like really important to me that we left it way better than we found it. And we absolutely did because it was dirty, because it was empty for so long. And we ended up getting we ended up getting the space full time many months later. It took like 5 months.
I think
So
that,
it's really funny.
yeah, I feel like everyone who has started something from scratch themselves, whether it's a community or like a software product or something, they know the V1 or even the V0 is going to be like kind of a mess. And so they're more tolerant of it because they're like, yeah, I had to do that too. You
Yeah.
haven't like, you haven't spent your whole life in these like beautiful structured, like I joined Google and had a great onboarding
Yeah.
program with a class or something. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, like my very first meetup of my female founder org in college had 0 people. And I thought
Exactly.
I did a Facebook event, I flyered all over campus and I told all my friends and I told my friends to tell my friends and it was still 0.
That is so sad. But listen, it happens. It happens to the best of us. And it's
Yeah. And
like,
I was just
it's
like,
part of it.
this is way harder than I thought.
Yeah, but it is
Yeah.
so part of it. It really is. I'll never forget, like there were like people from creative mornings there. And I was like, oh my God,
Awesome.
like, like these big, and I was like, why? I'm so sorry. Like we're doing our best. But in the moment, like I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe we did that. Like that is so funny. In the moment, I was like, this is legit. Like we have done it.
Hmm.
And it's just hysterical. Yeah, it was really fun. And it's a great memory. I have really great pictures from it. And it's just funny.
So, of
Yeah.
course, that was a great way to like build up awareness and trust with your community and future customers. But
Yeah.
also, it sounds like that was a way for the property manager to get trust. So, I'm pretty
Yeah.
clueless about everything real estate, but you've been in real estate, in co-working as spacious, and in hospitality. So, where did you learn from that? What kind of like deal did you get? How did you make sure, like you said, that it's a positive ROI for them?
Yeah. I learned this at Spacious. The people we worked with on the space side were so important to the success of the business. Like we were asking chefs and restaurant owners to let us use their spaces for people to come and work when they weren't serving dinner. Like that's an insane ask. And it was an insane ask 10 years ago. So if we found people who were like, okay, like sure. And my biggest thing coming from restaurants was we just have to make sure we never make their life harder than it already is because there is
Yeah.
no harder job. Like I have built multiple companies now. There's no harder job than running a restaurant. That is the hill I die on. It was
Like don't
impossible.
don't do like a whole setup that they have to now turn over before they're prepping for the
Nothing.
dinner rush. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can do
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
They should basically not know you're here or they're going to kick you out in three
Yeah.
seconds. And they should. Like that's a no-go. So I think I've taken so much of that with me here of like we are not the prime like tenant. Like nobody cares about like, this again, we were like really little and we were trying to utilize this space, but I knew that I wanted, because we were doing something new and something that was innovative and different than the roster of tenants. Like, this is a big landlord across the city, across the country, across the world. We needed to find a building where those people who were running the space and the building itself understood and bought into what we were doing and wanted to help us give it every chance of success that we could.
Hmm.
And even in the early days of trying to negotiate like a really short license, I knew I liked them. Curious. They were like open. And the kind of deal that we got, I think, was a really great representation of that because, as an early stage startup, we don't want to sign long-term leases. We
Yeah, you
don't
didn't
want to
lock
take on,
yourself into
no.
10 years. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
and that also was a lot of trust on the landlord to say like, hey, like we're going to make sure that we always tell you if we're planning to make a move, and you should always tell us, but we want to have this really open and transparent relationship, like, and in exchange for, maybe reduced rent or giving access to the other tenants in the building to come to Fabric and see what's going on here and make other friends in the building. Like, how can we make sure that we are giving as much to you as you're giving to us? And that relationship has been wonderful. Like, I see them all the time. Like, they are fantastic and they have been so helpful, and that can make or break the experience for us as a business, but also for the member. If
Hmm.
you're not in a building where everyone who's there like understands what it is that you're trying to do and helps you to do that and doesn't kind of push you off as an afterthought. So it's been a wonderful experience here. And it's a wonderful experience in our second space in Dumbo too. It's really important to find aligned partners, and it's not always easy to do.
That's great. One thing back to customers, are there any interesting techniques you use to like incentivize word of mouth? Or like, did
Yeah.
you say like all of our events are going to be like bring one friend? I don't know, anything like that.
Yeah, we were really strategic in the beginning. We made all of our gatherings open to anyone, and that was for word of mouth. So if we hosted a gathering, anyone could come. If a community builder who was a member of Fabric hosted a gathering, anyone can come. So what that does, or did for us in the beginning, is it generated thousands of unique visitors to Fabric every month. And from a like go to market in a new city perspective, you can't buy that. Like, especially with an in real life component. Like, of course we test social, and now we have paid ads, and we do a little bit of paid spend here and there, but it's people, like getting people to physically walk through the door of your space is what generates that word of mouth. So that was a really strategic decision we made in the very beginning, and we learned a lot from that of like, okay, like, there are people who might find value in coming to the gatherings, but maybe not enough value to become a member. Like, how do we bridge that gap? Like, what do those people want? And that has led us to create, a slew of different membership tiers to meet people where they are in their like community and social health journey. Because that's the way we talk about it. Like, okay, you're not ready to commit, like dive in full time to working on your social health or building out a community or making friends or whatever it is, but maybe you're ready to like dip your toe in it and you want to come here a couple of times a month or wherever it is that you are. We talk about it like a gym. A lot of us don't take our physical health for granted, right? Like, that is very much part of us as this generation, as we all exercise and we think about what we eat, and like nutrition is something we talk a lot about, and mental health is something we talk a lot about. But social health is really that third kind of invisible pillar of wellness that we need to be talking about more. So when I start like having this conversation with people that walk through the door, sometimes they look at me like I'm like crazy. Like, what are you talking about? But other times I think people really get it. And when you have that conversation and say like, hey, do you see someone for coffee every day? Like, do you see it? Because sometimes we're in our apartments all the time. Like, it's really
Hmm.
hard, especially in cities like New York. Like, how can you start prioritizing connection?
Hmm.
Fabric is here to help you do that. Here's like the lowest way for you to engage, but engage because it's good for you and because we want you to like find connection and belonging and all those things. And that has been, I think, a great learning from those initial early like strategic decisions of how to get people to know what this is and start having this like conversation that was new at the time and kind of still new.
I love the fitness thing. You're like, you take your vitamins, take your social
Yeah.
vitamins. Yeah, yeah.
Take your social vitamins. I mean, there's this whole movement. It's not really in the US as much, but it's called social prescribing. And it's like people are doctors, like true medical doctors are prescribing clubs and
Wow.
growing
Very rare.
communities.
That's cool.
So that, because like, yes, you might be struggling with anxiety and you might need a prescription, like a medicine to help you, but what will also help you is engaging with other people around something that makes you happy. So we're going to prescribe you both. like go do it
Hmm.
and see what helps. That's incredible. Like that is, I think, something that's really powerful. And we're going to see a lot more of it.
That's really interesting. One thing that's really impressive as from a business side is that you said that you have a 9-to-1 LTV to CAC ratio. How is it possible?
First of all, law of small numbers. We've only been
Yeah, sure,
operational for
sure.
18 months. So like, let's talk again in a few years. But it's all of that. It's all of those decisions. It's all of the organic word of mouth. It's really being strategic on where we spend money and where we don't. We would rather send 100 organic LinkedIn messages and then spend, $500 on a really beautiful breakfast and consider that our CAC,
Hmm. Hmm.
then put that $500 into, paid spend on Instagram and like, see what you get. Right. So we are just really strategic in where we spend our money. And we do like count every dollar that goes to acquisition, even if for us that's breakfast. Right. But it is something that's really intentional for us. And again, we're just really lucky. Like, this isn't unique to anyone, but we have referral programs and we were built that, really trying to figure out how to be as scrappy as possible. We just brought on, like, forget what we're using, some referral tool that's helping us do that at scale. But we've been really lucky with organic word of mouth and people finding Fabrik synonymous with community in the city. And, we hope to be able to replicate that as we grow.
Hmm. Um, so I know that you, of course, have the memberships as a stream
Mhm.
of revenue. Is there a B2B component for people to use spaces? Like, what are some other revenue streams that you have going?
The future of Fabrik does have a B2B component. Today, we're very focused on membership revenue. We focus a lot on recurring revenue, and that's very individual right now. So very B2C. But we do have some non-recurring revenue, like people that are maybe not a part of our community might be interested in hosting a one-off gathering. So that's variable revenue. And then we have day passes and other ways that we generate revenue. But we try not to skew like, we do have space and sometimes it isn't 100% utilized. And there are ways for us to monetize that to generate more revenue, but we try not to skew too far outside of the realm of the core business. The B2B angle is something that we're testing in the fall, and it's not really as space related in that, like, we're not renting out space, but we are still kind of threading that community. I just used the word thread, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say. We're like
Hmm.
threading the community theme into what it means to find community at work. So for Fabrik for Teams and some other kind
Cool.
of interesting ways to think about community at scale.
Okay, awesome. We've talked about a lot of different interesting tactics you've used. I love to do like a little debrief.
Sure.
So what were some learnings you took from London and Tribeca for opening Dumbo? And what are some things that you are maybe going to learn and do differently for your next location?
Yeah, great question. I mean, every time you do it, you get better. So there's
Totally.
just so many learnings, like just the little details of like how people enter a space. Like that's a big struggle for us because we use underutilized or wasted office, which means that we're not on the ground floor of anywhere.
Hmm.
So getting into the building is so hard. And, there's a lot of SOPs that go into like working with the building and how do you let people in and how would you consider our members? Will you consider them an employee so they can get in whenever they want to? So we learned a lot of that through Tribeca and London that we applied to even just our early landlord conversations with our Brooklyn space of like, here's all the things we've seen gone wrong. Like, let's preempt those before we sign anything. Like, how will you work with us on making sure that our members can get into the building? Like, it's just
Yeah.
really easy, like very easy logistics. Like from a logistical perspective, how does this work? So that is a really big one.
I've been to so many events and sometimes you're like, am I in the right place? Because
Yeah.
it's dark. You have to go around a lot of things. And then there's no front desk. And then there's like the really old school elevator with a grate that you
Yeah.
open. And I'm
No,
like, am I going to an event or am I
I
like,
know.
what
I
is
know.
this? Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And that is like one of the things we try to combat with Fabrik generally, that like the spaces that are available to host events at like a relatively affordable price point are that.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I don't know
That's
if I
why they're
want to be there.
affordable. They're not very desirable. Yeah.
It's hard, but that's what's available. So, like, of course, that's where, like, it's a double-edged sword. But we think about entry a lot, and we have by no means perfected it. It is something that we constantly are iterating on and seeing points of friction and trying to remove it. But we try to preempt that now with every space that we go to understand, like, here's what the problems we had. How do we like pre-mortem this a little bit so that we don't have those problems in the future? And then something that we didn't do in Dumbo that I kind of wish we did is we didn't do another founding class for Dumbo because we kind of considered it part of Tribeca in that if you are a member of Tribeca, you do get access to Dumbo. The spaces operate as a network. But the reason we chose Dumbo is because it's a very different market and a super different neighborhood than Tribeca. So different that I do think we could have done another kind of founding class and it would have benefited everybody. So that's a
Mhm.
learning. For our next space in New York, we probably will.
Yeah, because it seems like New York is one place, even those two neighborhoods are not crazy far from each other.
Mhm.
And yet, for people to go somewhere conveniently,
Yeah.
the reality is people are not crossing Brooklyn and Manhattan unless they have
No.
like a job there all the
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
true. It's very true.
Um, okay, great. Well, this has been awesome. I love to finish on the last question, going into kind of our title, taste and tactics. A lot of the episode focuses on tactics, and I love to learn about taste. So, is there any time in this process where your personal taste went against the data or the rest of your team? And how did you decide if you wanted to follow that taste or not?
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily taste, but maybe it is. So I think a strategic decision really early on that I was very passionate about, I'm sure Grandma would laugh about this now, is that because this is a space that is revolved around community, I didn't want to do like anything outside of that. So something we often talked about was like day passes and how do you let people experience the space? And I was just really against it. I thought you were kind of in or you were out. And because we want you to focus on your social health. We don't want you to pop in for a day and leave. Like there are co working spaces that allow you to do that if that is what you're here for. And I kind of said, no, 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 forever until one day I was like, okay, fine, let's just try it. And it's been a tremendous success. Like people use day passes as a way to test the space all the time, as a way
Yes.
to see if there's people here who they'll like. We have a 35% conversion right now from day pass to actual
Oh, that's
membership.
high.
Like it
Yeah,
is a
that's awesome.
wonderful lead gen tool. And I think it's really great for the people who are actual members of Fabrik to like see new faces and to have these conversations to help people kind of decide whether or not they would join. So I was just proven wrong by my team. It happens all the time, but that was a big one.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Jaclyn, for joining us.
You're
This has been so
welcome.
enlightening, and I really appreciate it. And I
Sure.
definitely encourage every listener to go to Fabrik because it's lovely, and I've been
Yeah.
there for all kinds of things. So, huge
Oh,
fan.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What an awesome episode with Jaclyn. Really loved learning so much from her. So, here are some of my top 3 takeaways from the episode that I hope are really useful for you, and I think you can bring it into any future launches that you have. So I love the concept of the founding 50. They were so crucial to jumpstart the network, especially because this was a community product, community launch. Obviously, you want those like super users. You want to cultivate them and figure out who those really passionate people are going to be. And I love that she was like, we locked in a low price for them. We engaged them really deeply. We brought their communities in. We gave them the space for them to host unlimited events. She really gave those extra benefits and went the extra mile to make sure that they had a great experience and felt really like loyal and dedicated. Another thing that I thought was really useful from that is that she over time figured out how to curate that community so that it reflected what they wanted. So in London, the founding 50 were really like tech centric, and then she wanted a more diverse variety of community builders in New York. And so sought out those different groups and found them, especially leaning into the character of New York and the location. This is something I also learned that when I was building On Deck Catalyst. We also had a founding member list that we displayed on the website. And it was really important for me that those people were from a really wide variety of backgrounds. And so I worked with 2 teammates internally at the company who had very different networks than me to recruit those people that we wanted to start with. Second thing that I learned was don't be afraid to start with some really scrappy stuff. Loved that she did breakfasts over and over. They were inexpensive. They were simple, but they still got people talking, got people meeting, and got people excited about what Fabrik would turn into and become. And I loved that her basic like online technique was just a super high volume of cold LinkedIn outreach. That's one of my favorite things to do. It's not like marketing automation, really. Like, I'm sure you can use AI tools to send a higher volume of those. But otherwise, it's not the most sophisticated thing, but it works really well because that's a place that if a lot of your users and members live, you can understand, like, what are they looking for? What are their backgrounds? Keep in touch with them long term. And then the last thing that I thought was awesome was, of course, that in-person event in the barely ready space. It still brought people together and attracted really high quality of community people. Finally, I think if you're making a new concept like a community space rather than a typical co-working space, a lot of your marketing is going to revolve around education. So I think when you focus with those early users and making sure that they're bought in and they're educated on the ethos and the concept of your product, they get it. And that enables them to have that word of mouth spread. So instead of you constantly just having to educate, figure out the people who are like, oh my God, that makes so much sense to me. I really want that. Oh, I've wanted that for so long. Oh, I love the way that you're doing that. I always had that same problem. So I think that that's a great technique to figure out, like, instead of, oh my God, we need to educate people so much and we can't like figure it out and people are just not getting it. And there are going to be a lot of people who don't get it. You can be like, oh, here's the 10 people who do. Now let's like leverage that and have them spread through word of mouth for the 50, the 100, the 1,000 first customers. Thanks again to Jaclyn.
Taste and Tactics is available on every major podcast platform and at Taste and Tactics on LinkedIn, X, TikTok, and Instagram. Thank you to our producer, Simran Honda. See you next week.